Well, a very happy first Monday of 2021. But what exactly does it mean when we say Happy New Year? We've all said it, and we all have had someone say it to us. But I thought it would be fascinating to decode it and then talk about how do we actually make sure that it is a happy New Year. I have two remarkable individuals. They're actually coaches and thought leaders in the area of change. And they've written a book called The 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. It's Dr. Elia Gourgouris and Con Apostolopoulos. So I'm delighted to have both Elia and Con join me to really try not only talk about Happy New Year, but also some practical, tangible things that each and every one of us can be doing to ensure that it is. So gentlemen, thank you, Elia and Con. So Elia, you came to me and you said, Nadia, why don't we do a broadcast on? So please explain what motivated today's conversation.
Well, Coach Con and I have a process that we call the best year yet that we do ourselves. I mean, we do it every year for ourselves, but we also do it for our clients and our corporate clients. But I had this thought, over the holidays, what if we make a slight adjustment to that? Everybody wishes everybody else Happy New Year in all languages across the globe. And they have an intention to have a good year. And they have some New Year's resolutions, which most of them go out the window by the end of January, as we know. What if we actually said, instead of just saying Happy New Year, why don't we create a program to create the happiest year of our lives coming up? We come out of 2020, which was one of the toughest years in modern human history. So it would be a giant leap, but it's feasible and it's doable. And Coach Con and I have a process that we'd like to take you through a little bit of how do you truly create your happiest year yet? And I'll start first, and then Coach, you take over after that. Before we look forward to the new year, we look back to the year that has passed. And the first question that we need to answer is, what were our biggest and our happiest moments and our greatest accomplishments?
So, Elia, can we just have a moment here? And I'm going to ask whoever's joined us, if you are able to get a pen and paper. I would recommend that anybody who is able to either get a pen and paper or type into your phone. If you're driving, please don't do either. Okay, so number one is, what was your happiest moments? Then
your happiest moments are your greatest accomplishments. As human beings, we rarely take the time to look back and reflect back and say, even though last year was a tough year, we still did a lot of great things. I just did my own personal best year yet, and I came up with 41 accomplishments from last year, which I have no idea. I mean, you have to be thoughtful, and you got to write them down. So we begin with our happiest moments. When did we feel connected? When did we make a difference in somebody else's life? So that's question number one. Coach Con, take over for question number two.
Yeah. So thank you again for having us, Nadia. Happy New Year to everybody.
How do you say Happy New Year in Greek?
Chronia pola, kali chronia.
Polychronia?
Chronia pola means many years in the translation. Kali chronia, a good year.
Beautiful. And in Afrikaans, 'n gelukkige nuwe jaarsdag.
Wow.
Impressive.
I love it. So the expression, the desire, the wish is universal. I mean, you can say it in pretty much any language. And just like Dr. Elia was saying, we start off by reflecting. This is a time for reflection. Anytime where we're making that transition from one period to another, from one year to another, it's a wonderful time for us to be able to reflect. So as Dr. Elia said, it's good to start with the positives. What are the things that we feel good about? But then it's also important for us to counterbalance that and look at it and say, okay, where did we fall short? Where perhaps did we have some disappointments, things that didn't work out the way that we had hoped? Many times we say that the best laid plans of mice and men, and things happen. Life happens while we're planning other things. Mm-hmm. So life happened to us in 2020. Good things happen, but also some disappointments. So we start with that and we balance the two and we see, what did we learn from that? Doctor?
Yeah, that's question number 3, which is, from our accomplishments and our happiest moments, we can learn what we're capable of doing. And certainly if I can do that in 2020, I can do that and so much more in 2021. But from our disappointments, we call those potential lessons, because if I don't learn from my disappointments, I will repeat them most likely in the new year, right? people's New Year's resolutions year after year after year are typically come down to this. I want to get in shape and I want to lose some weight. And they do that year after year after year, right?
Well,
so
I think
they're not
with
learning.
the pandemic, people are also going, I want to revive my business. So when we look at the lessons of 2020 and the disappointment has been, for example, I know some gentlemen who are working in San Francisco, and they had a thriving business that was about a rideshare app. And pre-COVID, it was doing brilliantly. Well, how do you cope with that disappointment?
Right. So there are things that we need to look at, but what is the lesson? And you know better than anybody, having interviewed the great man himself, Nelson Mandela used to say, we never lose. We either win or we learn.
Yes.
And through that process, you think about it, your resolutions and our ability to succeed in those. And Dr. Elia mentioned it. Statistically, 4 out of 5 people will give up on their New Year's resolutions by the end of January, beginning of February. 4 out of 5. Now, the 20% that's left of that, some of them will accomplish that. About 8% will actually accomplish what they set out to do because they follow a proven approach and they have the commitment. That's part of what we're talking about today. But even the percentage that may not reach their ultimate goal, that may be a little bit disappointed along the way for not reaching and crossing the finish line, there is much learning that takes place. And that's part of the learning that we want to capture up front through the accomplishments, the disappointments. But then, as Dr. Elia said, going in to say, what were the lessons that we learned from that? That is important for us to capture because that, along with our core values, become the filter through which we will plan the next year.
And you do this with teams as well. You know, it's not only a deeply personal thing. You go into organizations, you work with teams to say, okay, what did we do last year? What was beyond our control? And what did we learn from it? And I think what's masterful about what you're doing is you're also applying this to the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we typically do this with the C-suite for the senior leaders. And once we do the senior leaders' best year yet, and now the happiest year yet, then you know what? It's really interesting. The chief marketing officer says, I love that. I want you to do that for my marketing team. The chief HR officer says, I want you to do that for my HR team. Sales, customer service, the same thing, because it's applicable regardless of the team or the organization or the division or the entire enterprise. You can do it from an individual all the way to the top. And that's the beauty of it. What is the end result? Is we come up with the top 10, what we call SMART goals.
Mm-hmm.
Specific, measurable, obviously actionable, and so on, within the best year yet approach. And then there's sort of basically Coach Khan and I are accountability coaches.
But would we agree that this year has been unprecedented? If you've done this at the end of 2019, it would be okay, what didn't we do? But this year, there's been so much that has been beyond our control. How do you coach people through understanding that, internalizing that, and still having the motivation to move on? Because I don't think any of us expected this to last as long as it has.
Right. Well, let me jump in here a little bit because it's a broader question and it applies even beyond the 2020 year. If you look at it in broader terms as coaches, Nadia, our job is to help people move away from a fixed mindset that keeps them trapped at times with preconceived notions, and rather looking at it from a growth mindset and an ability to be able to explore and get beyond that. The mind is a very malleable thing. It will grow and it will be able to make strides forward if we let it. Mm-hmm. And from that perspective, it's important for us to first of all embrace this process. When Dr. Elia and I look at that, we treat the whole person. When we work with people, we don't work with them purely on their 9-to-5 responsibilities. We ask them to look at their life as a whole. One of the big lessons that we've taken from this past year is that we're no longer coaching people on work-life balance. We're coaching them on work-life integration. Mm. And it's important for people to understand because especially during this 2020 period, the lines between our personal life and our professional life have been blurred, not just rhetorically or because I brought some work home. We were working from home. The lines were very, very blurred in that sense. And the effectiveness of being able to manage that, to have the right kind of discipline, but also the right kind of allowance to yourself, to be able to blend and transition quickly and easily from one role to the other is paramount.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot state that enough.
So if anybody is just joining us, I'm talking to two remarkable authors and coaches and consultants in the area of dealing with change and transformation. And today we're talking about happiness with Dr. Elia and Coach Khan. The first thing in their guide or their roadmap was to look at what you've done well in 2020. The second thing was to look at what didn't work out and what you learned from it. Dr. Elia, what was the third?
Well, the third one is the lessons learned. Basically, we want them to be translated into some positive guidelines. And when I first went through this process, and I was getting certified in this program, I started writing down my lessons learned, and I went up to the facilitator, and I'm like, and I showed him, and he says to me, without even looking at my lessons learned, he goes, "Cut him in half." And I'm like, "Cut him in half?" He goes, "Yeah, cut him in half." So I go back and I write him again, and I shorten them again. I go back to him. He says to me, "Cut him in half again." And at this point, he was starting to get on my nerves, like, what is wrong with this guy? And he stopped me. He says, "Elia, look, the most important lessons in life can be captured in 2 words or less, preferably 1. And at this point, I thought, this guy's crazy. How can you capture major life lessons in 2 words or less, preferably 1? Now, since then, it's been 13 years now. I've done hundreds of these. He was totally right. So what do these powerful guidelines look like? These are powerful words like the word expand, celebrate, balance, happiness, delegate, communicate. Because if you really look at your disappointments, there's usually a theme. The first time I did that, I think I had like about 14 disappointments, and half of them would not have been disappointments if I had asked for help from somebody else, which I didn't. So my guideline for that particular year was ask for help, and that would solve the majority of my disappointments if I allowed other people to come into my life and support me, just like I support everybody else. I mean, that's just an example. Yeah. But the guidelines are very powerful in helping you to design your new year and to make it a successful and a happy year.
And that's so interesting, because I think there's a misconception that happiness is the state of being. It's this constant state of joy. And what I've uncovered talking to both of you and through my own experiences, happiness is a result of mastering difficulties. Happiness is a result of overcoming obstacles and challenges.
Right. And in many ways, Nadia, I mean, most people think that if I can only be successful, I can be happy. When the truth, and Dr. Elia has talked about that even in his first book when he wrote about happiness, The 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, it illustrates it perfectly, because he says it's the other way around. It's happy people that are successful. So we really need to redefine that concept of success and what success looks like. When you look around, for those of us that have traveled abroad, that have been around the world, that have been immersed in other cultures, you see that there are people that materially have much less than what we do here in the States, but yet they find themselves so much happier. And yet here we are, a society that should be thriving, and we are the most over-medicated, over-drugged, obese, unhappy, overworked culture in the modern history. Why? Because we associate happiness with success, and we're striving for a success that is very hard, if not impossible, to reach. And we set unrealistic goals rather than appreciating what we have. Well, if 2020 has taught us, again, nothing else, it's appreciate what truly matters most to us.
And doesn't social media just exacerbate that? I love Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, "Comparison is the thief of joy." Talk about a society where, and I don't know if we're at similar ages, I'm assuming we might be of a similar generation, gentlemen. But when we grew up, there was not social media. We did not have beautiful people and beautiful things in our faces 24/7.
Right.
And I think we were so liberated as a result of that. I think this generation has a very tough time. If you're not the next Mark Zuckerberg, by the time you're 24 years old, you haven't succeeded. So these principles that you speak about are so foundational. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about how to make it a truly happy 2021. And I have recommended that you have a pen and paper at hand. And so thinking about those things, other tips and ideas, I don't want you to give it all away, because I know you cost a lot of money. So we are delighted to have you here in this capacity. And I would rather people hire you for the full program. But some nuggets will be very, very helpful as we continue to navigate completely what they call a VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
I want to speak specifically about comparisons because I'm glad you brought it up. When we compare ourselves to somebody else, there are only two outcomes: either I'm better than you or you're better than me.
Right.
And if I come across as better than you, I'm being arrogant and just foolish, and nobody likes people like that anyway. But most likely, when we compare ourselves to other people, we tend to feel like we're less than. And that causes a lot of stress and anxiety and even depression and even more negative thoughts and behaviors. The only true comparison that matters in life is the one we do within ourselves. So a simple example. Let's just look at our physical health. We can make a comparison and say, where was I 5 years ago, last year, and now? And if I'm actually have improved and I'm better physically now, in better shape, and I eat healthier and better nutrition, that's not an arrogant statement. That's a factual statement. On the flip side, if I used to be a lot better 5 years ago, but over time, there are kids, stress, and so on, I'm not eating healthy, I'm not exercising as much, then the question is this still a priority in my life? It's not meant to beat me up. And obviously, I would assume that physical health is a priority. Then the next question is, what am I willing to do about it to get back in the same shape I was 5 years ago? And have form a plan of action and then do it. That way, I avoid anybody else. There's no comparison. Nobody else really matters. What matters, am I on the right path? If I'm doing well, great, pat myself on the back, nice job. And if I'm not, what am I willing to do about it? And that eliminates the whole conundrum of comparisons, which are deadly.
Yeah, and I'd like to take that forward a little bit, Nadia, and kind of go a little bit deeper with that piece. During times, difficult times like the ones that we've experienced, and we all know that, the problems with our society here in the States, especially, and in the Western world many times, come to the forefront because so many of us associate our identity as a person with our job titles. And the reality is that our world has been thrown up in the air and come down in a very different place. And many people have found themselves through no fault of their own, unemployed or underemployed or having to close down their businesses. When we travel abroad, when you meet people from other parts of the world, the question that they ask you is, Nadia, who are you? What's your story? They don't ask, Nadia, what do you do for a living? That's a phenomenon that we have here in the States. And too many times we do that because we find our worth through our job titles. We saw that in the recent crisis, not just this one, but in 2008 with the economic downturn. How many people found themselves depressed because they were finding their value through their job title. And without that job, they really didn't feel like they had any value. Now, I would invite people as they seek out to what makes them happy during this year, look at themselves as a whole person. What are the various hats that they wear? They're not just a vice president. They're also a father. They're a mother. They're a sibling. They're a child. They're a coach. They're a leader in their community. They are a philanthropist. They are so many different things. Find what those things are and really give yourself and evaluate yourself and look at your accomplishments through all of those lenses. And as you make your plans for the whole person. Find yourself as a whole identity, not just your 9-to-5 identity, but look beyond that, because that's where the truth happiness will come in.
And when we do the happiest year yet, that's one of the steps that we take is to identify some of the roles that you play: mother, wife, sister, daughter, friend, colleague, teammate, leader, thought leader, whatever, right? And then we ask people, how well are you really doing playing that role on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 is like home run, I'm perfect. 1 is like I totally suck at it, whatever. And so people have an idea of what roles are their strengths and they're doing really well, and what roles are they really suffering. You'd be surprised that one of those roles, of course, is self-care. Right. How often people, I've done, like I said, hundreds of these, will give themselves like a 3. On a scale of 1 through 10, meaning they don't take care of themselves physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. Maybe some other areas they give themselves an 8 or a 9, which is great, but there are gaps there, right? And it's all about integration, like Coach Khan talked about it. Forget about the life-work balance. Let's not use that phrase anymore. How can we integrate all these different roles that we play to create those SMART goals for each one of those roles to create our happiest year yet. And that's basically our program in a lot of ways.
And I'm sure there's an aspect of happiest year yet that has to do with relationships, has to do with the quality of your relationships. And now we know that neuroscience backs up what we're doing right now. Here are the three of us. I happen to have met both Dr. Elia and Coach Con through a mastermind group. Just talking to you, I know that I will be in a better mood and I'll feel a sense of joy. In fact, I had a sense of joy when I just saw your faces. But just this connection, and the three of us may have never met in person, but by having a stimulating conversation and just that reminder that those are so important.
Absolutely. And it brings to mind a story that I heard once, and it stems from the Epicurean philosophy. And every time I see Dr. Elia, I have to remember that, because I think that's one of his greatest aspirations, the philosophical approach of living life to its fullest. And as he likes to say, really living your happiest moment now and planning for that. Well, there's a story of an old Greek man sitting in front of an olive grove by the ocean. And he's sitting at a table enjoying the olives from the grove itself. And along comes an American tourist, and the man invites him to sit down with him. And through their broken communication, he shares some of the olives with him. The American is ecstatic from this and says, "These are the best olives I've ever tried, I've ever tasted. Wow, you should sell these. You should go ahead and package these and sell these all over the world. You'd make a lot of money." And the old Greek man says, "Why?" He says, "Because you can then grow your business and you can hire people and you can do all this stuff and you can go through this process and make tons of money." And he says, "For what?" He says, "Well, if you make a lot of money, you'll have a lot of time and you can do all the things that you want to do." And the Greek man says, "What, like sitting in front of my olive grove by the ocean enjoying
That is such a beautiful story. So to people who are listening to this conversation now or who are listening to recorded it, we wanted to have a conversation about how to have your happiest year. And in all the conversations that I have, both to my audiences and to your audiences, it really all starts with relationship to self, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I love the quote by Honoré de Balzac: "There is no greater impediment to getting on well with other people than being ill at ease with yourself." And what I love about your process, your happiest year yet process, is it starts with assessing your relationship with yourself, right?
Yes. The biggest lesson for me from 2020 really is do not procrastinate your happiness.
I love that.
In other words, don't wait until when the kids get out of school, or when this happens, or when I get a promotion, or when I write my next book, or when I give this talk, or when. Forget the wins. There are no guarantees in life.
No.
We don't even know if we're going to be here next year or even next month. As a result of that, it's actually very freeing, I believe, because it puts everything into its proper perspective. Like, live your best and your happiest life now, and the rest of it will take care of itself. Focus on that.
You say that. I just got news that a dear South African friend of mine, a woman who was an absolute icon in the food industry, Dora Satoli, died. And I just, before I came on, heard Dora, if any of her family or people who know Dora, I met Dora, 35 years ago, and just a remarkable human being, but also just brilliant at what she did in the food space in South Africa. And I thought about that. There was Dora's smiling face and going, did Dora have that sense of, I know she was remarkably successful and she had a beautiful family, but what we're also experiencing right now is, whether it's COVID related or not, is death is more apparent than it has been. And we're all, I don't think there's any one of us who doesn't know somebody or of somebody who hasn't been impacted.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but these difficulties and these challenges and these life-threatening situations, Nadia, really help us focus. Help us focus on those few critical things. And if we take what Dr. Elia said earlier about the mantras, about taking your life lessons and really cutting them in half.
Well, I think what you said, it's the life lessons, but then looking at what you want to do with them,
Correct.
right? Is that what you're cutting? Yes.
Correct. And then you take that and let that become your mantra. Mm-hmm. Let that become the thing, because if it's balance, if it's resilience, if it's ask for help, if it's whatever that mantra is, let that guide you during this coming year, because these crises have allowed us to really focus on what matters most to us.
This has been such a wonderful, please go ahead.
I was just going to share one of my three, guidelines for this year. It's 2 words: extra mile, meaning that I've decided for 2021, I want to go the extra mile with every one of my relationships, starting with my wife and my kids, because the extra mile lane is never crowded. I want you to think about that for your business. When you go the extra mile towards your customers, think about what comes in return. Now you don't only have customers that trust you, you have customers that are loyal to you and to your brand and will stay with you forever. They won't even look at to go to your competitor if you go the extra mile. And so that's applicable not just on a personal level, but on a business level as well.
I mean, again, what always is so remarkable for me about the two of you is, yes, we know that there's certain amount of universal truths, but the way you present it and how you work with people is so helpful. So if you have found this conversation helpful and you want to know more, let's hear from you, Dr. Elia, how people reach you, and then we'll go to Con.
Well, I think for both of us, I speak for both of us, LinkedIn, Coach Con, and for me, the Happiness Doctor, Elia Gourgouris, PhD. I think that we'd love to connect with you, and if we can be of assistance, obviously we'd love to do that on an individual and organizational level.
Beautiful. And is there a last wish? I know I really wish people a 2021 where you look at what you want to stop doing in your life, what you want to start doing, and what you want to continue. And just a year, please, of greater health and happiness and just positivity, right? For you, what do you wish? And I'll start with you, Dr. Elia, and then Coach Con.
First of all, I love the stop, start, and continue, which is one of the things that we actually do in when we coach people. Stop a certain behavior, start something new, and continue what's been working already. I think for me, like I said before, I really want to consistently go the extra mile in every interaction I have with people, whether it's a podcast interview or it's a family or extended family or friends or a homeless person or a total stranger. And so that's what I'm trying to put into practice. Go the extra mile and see what happens.
And they can reach you on LinkedIn, and the website is?
The website is dreliagourgouris.com. So that's my personal website, and then Fresh Business Solutions for Coach Con, right?
Yeah.
And Coach Con, just final thoughts on this first Monday of 2021.
Well, for me, it's as we see the calendar turn, as we have a chance to see the dates change, allow that to be that mental, that positive switch inside you to now make that conscious choice to pursue your happiest year yet, and to pursue that and not allow other circumstances, but make it happen. Take ownership of that. And I do have an exclusive for you, Nadia, that
Yes.
Elia and I have been working on for a little while. In a matter of 2 weeks, we will actually be launching our 30-day challenge. And it's a wonderful program that we invite people to come join us for 30 days to get their year off started well, and to work with us through our community, through our process of coaching and sharing a lot of our little secrets and everything that we can do to help them get started for the year. So if anybody's interested, they can reach out. Yeah, they can reach out to us. They can direct message us either at the Happiness Doctor on LinkedIn or Coach Con with myself. The Happiness Center and Fresh Biz Solutions are our websites, and I'm sure they'll be able to find us.
Gentlemen, as always, just inspiring, delightful to see you both. Let's continue. I love that you've given us concrete steps. And if you've just joined us, or if you're finishing, just a reminder right now to look at what went well in 2020, and then maybe what didn't, and then to really think about what lessons you learned, and then halve the to-dos, so that becomes your mantra. I love that from both of you. I'm Nadia Bilchik. And if you found today's conversation interesting, please reach out to me on nadiaspeaks.com. I've been doing work on helping people have a greater sense of engagement on all their virtual platforms and ensure that each and every virtual interaction is maximized. So if you want to know more, please reach out to me. And gentlemen, a great pleasure. And you might have to say it in Greek again, and I'll say it in Afrikaans, 'n gelukkige nuwejaarsdag, and you say in Greek?
Χρόνια πολλά.
Kali Chronia.
Beautiful.
And
Happy
we're
New
so
Year.
honored to be your first guest of the year. I mean, honestly, we're honored.
Exactly. The first guest of 2021.
Yeah.
Dr. Elia, Coach Khan, and the 30-day challenge, Fresh Biz Solutions.